My name is Henry Hank Lawson. I'm 62. My daughter-in-law sued to evict me so her parents could own their first home. In court, my 7-year-old grandchild asked the judge, "Can I show you something Grandpa doesn't know?" Please like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. That Sunday dinner, sitting at Dan and Vanessa's table with little Lily picking at her green beans, I should have heard the trap door creaking open beneath my feet. Instead, I'm thinking about the CO detector in their kitchen, the one I replaced last month when it started chirping at 3 a.m. Vanessa had called, panicked, saying the baby monitor was picking up the sound and waking Lily. I drove over in my pajamas with a fresh 9-volt in my test meter because that's what grandfathers do. That's what I've always done. "You know, Dad," Vanessa says, her voice smooth as the wine she's been sipping, "I was thinking about the suite over your garage. It would be perfect for my parents as a starter home." The fork stops halfway to my mouth. Dan's shoulders tense like he's bracing for impact, but he keeps cutting his pot roast into smaller and smaller pieces. Lily looks up from her plate, those curious brown eyes moving between the adults like she's watching a tennis match. "A starter home?" I repeat, setting down my fork with the careful precision I learned after 43 years of maintaining things, boilers, electrical panels, the delicate machinery of keeping buildings safe and functional. "They've been renting for 30 years, Vanessa continues, her words picking up momentum. "Rosa cleans offices at night. Miguel does landscaping. They deserve to own something, don't you think? Build some equity. Leave something for their family." The suite. My home for the past 6 years, since Dan bought this house after his divorce. The place where I rebuilt my life, piece by careful piece, after Janet passed. Where I labeled every circuit breaker in neat block letters. Where I test the smoke detectors every first Saturday of the month. Where I've created the kind of ordered, safe space that lets an old man sleep without nightmares. "It's not really a separate home, though," I say, my voice staying level despite the heat building in my chest. "It's my residence. It's where I live." "Technically," Vanessa says, and that word lands like a hammer on my sternum, "it's our property. Dan and I own it. You're staying there as our guest." Dan finally speaks, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we could talk about this later." "I'm just exploring options," Vanessa says, but her eyes have that strategic gleam I've seen when she's planning Lily's birthday parties or organizing neighborhood fundraisers. Every detail mapped out, every contingency considered, every outcome predetermined. Rosa and Miguel have been such good grandparents to Lily. They babysit constantly. They help with school pickup when Dan and I are swamped. They've earned this. I think about Rosa and Miguel, who are good people, kind people, who send me Christmas cards and always ask about my health when we bump into each other at family gatherings. They don't know they're being used as human shields in whatever war Vanessa has decided to wage against my continued existence in the family ecosystem. "Grandpa lives there," Lily says suddenly, her small voice cutting through the adult tension like a fire alarm. "Where would Grandpa go?" "Grandpa has lots of options," Vanessa says, her tone shifting to the bright, patronizing register she uses with children and elderly relatives. "He could find a nice apartment, maybe one of those senior communities with activities and friends his own age." The rage that floods through me is so pure, so white-hot, that for a moment I can't speak. Senior communities, activities, friends my own age. As if I'm some doddering old fool who needs to be managed and contained, shuffled off to play bingo with other discarded family members. "I pay for the utilities," I say, my voice still steady, still controlled, but with an edge now that makes Dan look up from his massacred pot roast. "I pay for the heating, the water, the electricity. I've put $15,000 into improvements over the past 6 years. I replaced the roof, updated the electrical panel, installed new insulation. I'm not a guest. I'm a tenant with documented payments and a paper trail of investment." "Your family," Vanessa says, and the word tastes like poison in my mouth when she says it. "Family doesn't need formal agreements. Family helps family." But we both know that's not true anymore, don't we? Because 3 days later, I'm sitting in a coffee shop downtown, staring at a manila folder Vanessa has slid across the table between us. The folder contains what she calls a family tenancy agreement, a document that apparently formalizes my status as someone who can be removed from my home with 60 to 90 days' notice for the purposes of family equity and legacy building. I open the folder with hands that have rewired emergency lighting systems during power outages that have never shaken when testing voltage or climbing ladders. But they're shaking now as I read the clean, professional language that reduces my life to a series of legal clauses and exit strategies. "This isn't personal, Dad," Vanessa says, using that title like a weapon. "It's about creating opportunities for everyone in the family. Rosa and Miguel need stability. They need to build something for their future." "What about my stability?" I ask, and I hate how the question sounds. Plaintive, desperate, like an old man begging for scraps. "What about my future?" "You'll figure it out," she says with the casual confidence of someone who has never had to figure anything out, who has never had to rebuild their entire life after loss, who has never had to create safety from nothing but determination and careful planning. "You're resourceful." I close the folder without signing anything. I drive home in my truck, past the elementary school where I used to work, past the hardware store where I buy my electrical supplies, past all the landmarks of a life built slowly and deliberately in this community. I pull into the driveway of Dan's house, their house, as Vanessa reminded me, and I look up at the windows of my suite above the garage, the windows where I installed new locks last year after a break-in 2 blocks over, the windows that look out on the small garden where Lily and I planted sunflowers last spring, where we watched them grow taller than her head, where we learned about patience and seasons and the way good things take time to develop if you tend them carefully. That night, I begin documenting everything, because I understand now that family goodwill is not enough, that verbal agreements and handshake deals are worthless when someone decides you've outlived your usefulness. I need paper. Paper is memory. Paper is proof. Paper doesn't lie or change its story, or forget the promises it made when it needed something fixed in the middle of the night. I gather bank transfer receipts, all of them labeled in my careful handwriting. Sweet heat water, roof patch materials, winter gas bill, electrical upgrade supplies. I collect the permits I pulled for the improvements, the before and after photos I took of every project, the receipts for every material purchase. I print out emails and text message screenshots. "Thanks for covering the property taxes this year, Dad. We'll pay you back. The insurance company needs those receipts for the roof repair you did. Could you handle the HVAC service call? We're swamped at work." 6 years of documented contributions, 6 years of being the family utility line, the one everyone tapped when they needed power, money, labor, time. 6 years of saying yes to every request, every emergency, every quick favor that somehow became my permanent responsibility. The certified mail arrives on a Tuesday morning. I sign for it with the same careful signature I've used for decades, the one that's been on work orders and safety inspections and incident reports. The envelope contains formal legal papers, notice of unlawful detainer, permissive use revoked. Defendant, Henry Lawson. I am now officially the enemy. The phone starts ringing that evening. Relatives who have heard Vanessa's side of the story, who want to know why I'm being difficult about such a reasonable request. Aunt Margaret calls to tell me it's only fair that Rosa and Miguel get their chance at home ownership. Cousin Rick wants to know why I can't just be the bigger person and find somewhere else to live. Uncle Jim suggests I'm being selfish by holding on to space that could benefit a younger family. Each conversation is a masterclass in gaslighting, in the careful construction of a narrative where I am the villain for wanting to continue living in my home, where my 6 years of financial contributions and physical labor are erased, where the documented proof of my tenancy is dismissed as technicalities and paperwork. They need stability, everyone keeps saying, as if I don't. As if I'm some rootless wanderer who can just pick up and start over at 62, as if I don't deserve the stability I've worked for and paid for and maintained with my own hands. Dan calls less frequently now, and when he does, his voice has the hollow quality of someone who has chosen his side and is trying to live with it. He talks around the lawsuit, mentions the weather, asks about my health in the distant way you'd inquire about an acquaintance's surgery. The easy familiarity we've built over 6 years is gone, replaced by the careful politeness of people who used to love each other. "You could contest it," he says during one of these stilted conversations, "but that would just make everything more complicated for everyone." Everyone. Not me. Everyone else. Because I'm no longer part of everyone. I'm the complication. "I am contesting it," I tell him. "I've hired an attorney." The silence that follows is so complete, I can hear the clock ticking in my kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of Lily playing in their backyard. "That seems extreme," Dan finally says. Extreme. As if defending my legal right to remain in my home is some kind of unreasonable escalation. As if allowing myself to be evicted without a fight would be the mature, family-minded thing to do. "What seems extreme to me," I say, my voice finally carrying some of the anger that's been building for weeks, "is filing legal papers against your father instead of having an honest conversation." "We tried to have conversations," Dan says, but his heart isn't in the argument. He knows they didn't try. He knows Vanessa presented this as a done deal from the beginning, a decision that had already been made in meetings I wasn't invited to, in discussions that happened in their bedroom after I'd gone upstairs to my own space. "No," I say. "You presented me with an ultimatum. There's a difference. My attorney, Carla Nguyen, is a woman in her 40s who specializes in housing law and has no patience for emotional manipulation disguised as legal strategy. She reviews my documentation with the thoroughness of someone who understands that the devil lives in the details, that cases are won and lost on the quality of record-keeping and the precision of language. You have an excellent paper trail, she tells me during our second meeting. Bank transfers, documented improvements, permitted work, utility payments. You've been functioning as a tenant with the knowledge and acceptance of the property owners. The permissive use argument falls apart when there's this much evidence of ongoing financial obligation and property investment. What about their argument that Rosa and Miguel deserve home ownership? I ask. Carla looks at me over her reading glasses with the expression of someone who has seen every permutation of family greed dressed up as moral imperative. Deserve has nothing to do with it, she says. This isn't a feel-good housing story. This is a property law case. Either you have legal standing to remain in your residence or you don't. Based on your documentation, you do. She coaches me on courtroom demeanor, on how to stick to facts instead of emotions, on how to present evidence without editorial commentary. She reminds me that judges care about legal precedent and documented proof, not family dynamics or moral arguments about who deserves what. Don't bring your granddaughter unless the judge specifically requests it, she advises. Children in courtrooms complicate things. They introduce emotional elements that can overshadow the legal merits of your case. I relay this to Dan during one of our increasingly rare phone calls, suggesting that maybe Lily should stay with a babysitter during the hearing. Vanessa thinks it would be good for the judge to see the family dynamics, he says, his voice carrying that apologetic tone that's become his default setting. To understand what's at stake for everyone. What's at stake for everyone. Not what's at stake for me, my home, my stability, my sense of place in a world that has already taken my wife, my career, and most of my illusions about family loyalty. What's at stake for everyone else, who will benefit from my displacement. The judge will understand that I'm Lily's grandfather, whether I live above your garage or in an apartment across town, I say. My relationship with my granddaughter isn't dependent on my housing situation. Of course not, Dan says quickly. That's not what anyone is suggesting. But we both know it is exactly what they're suggesting, that my value to the family is tied to my usefulness, my compliance, my willingness to sacrifice my own interests for the greater good as defined by Vanessa's strategic planning. That love, in this family, comes with conditions and exit clauses. The week before the court date, Vanessa begins touring my suite like a realtor showing property to prospective buyers. She comes by with Rosa and Miguel, ostensibly to visit, but she spends the entire time measuring windows for floating shelves and discussing paint colors for the quick refresh she's planning. "The natural light in here is amazing," she tells Rosa, standing in my living room like I'm not there, like I'm already gone. "And Hank has done such a nice job with the improvements. You'll have a perfect little nest here." I watch Rosa's face during this performance, looking for signs that she understands the violence being done, that she recognizes the cost of her perfect little nest. But Rosa is focused on the practical details, the kitchen layout, the bathroom fixtures, the storage space. And if she has any awareness of the human displacement required to make her homeownership dreams come true, she keeps it well hidden. Miguel, at least, seems uncomfortable with the whole situation. He makes polite conversation about the electrical work I've done, compliments the craftsmanship of the built-in shelving I installed, asks careful questions about the heating system that suggest he understands the amount of work and money that went into making this space livable. "You did good work here," he tells me quietly, while Rosa and Vanessa discuss color schemes. "Real good work. It's the closest anyone has come to acknowledging what this actually costs me, and I appreciate it even as I recognize that his appreciation won't change anything. Rosa and Miguel aren't the villains here. They're just collateral beneficiaries of someone else's cruelty, innocent parties caught up in Vanessa's determination to reorganize the family according to her vision of optimal resource allocation." The night before the court hearing, I walk through my suite one more time, testing each smoke detector, each carbon monoxide alarm, checking that every circuit breaker is properly labeled, that every system is functioning as it should. It's a ritual I've performed monthly for 6 years. But tonight it feels like a farewell tour, a final inspection of a life that might be ending. I think about the morning Janet died, how the EMTs couldn't revive her despite having all the right equipment, all the proper training. How systems fail sometimes despite careful maintenance, despite following every protocol, despite doing everything right. How you can test all the alarms and label all the breakers and still lose everything that matters in a single moment of catastrophic failure. But this isn't a heart attack or a house fire. This is a choice. This is a family decision to sacrifice one member's stability for another's opportunity, dressed up in legal language and moral arguments about fairness and deserving. I don't sleep much that night. Instead, I sit in my kitchen, organizing my documentation one final time, making sure every receipt is in chronological order, every bank transfer properly labeled, every photo clearly dated. Paper is memory. Paper doesn't change its story or forget its promises or decide that love comes with conditions. The courthouse is one of those imposing civic buildings that's designed to remind you of the serious business conducted within its walls. I meet Carla in the hallway outside the courtroom, and she reviews our strategy one final time. Stick to the facts, present the documentation clearly, avoid emotional appeals, let the evidence speak for itself. "Remember," she says, "you're not asking for sympathy. You're asserting your legal rights based on documented evidence. This is a property law case, not a family drama." Dan and Vanessa arrive with their attorney, Travis Keene, a polished man in his 50s who specializes in real estate law and has the confident demeanor of someone who wins most of his cases. Rosa and Miguel are with them, dressed in their Sunday best, looking nervous and out of place in the formal setting, and there's Lily, holding Dan's hand, wearing a little blue dress and carrying her tablet in a small backpack. She waves at me with her free hand, and I wave back, wondering what story they've told her about why we're all here, why Grandpa and Daddy are on opposite sides of a courtroom. "I thought we agreed not to bring her," I say to Dan during a brief moment when our paths cross in the hallway. "Vanessa thought it was important," he says, not meeting my eyes, "for the judge to see the full family situation. The full family situation, as if my love for my granddaughter is somehow evidence that I should give up my home, as if my relationship with a 7-year-old justifies my eviction." Judge Miriam Patel calls the court to session, and I sit at the defendant's table with Carla, while Travis Keene presents his case for the plaintiff. He's good at his job, I'll give him that. He paints a picture of generous family members providing temporary accommodation to an aging relative who is now refusing to gracefully transition to more appropriate housing, so that deserving working-class grandparents can achieve their American dream of homeownership. Your Honor, Keene says, his voice carrying the practiced sincerity of someone who's made this type of argument hundreds of times, my clients purchased this property with the understanding that the in-law suite would eventually provide housing for Mrs. Vanessa Lawson's parents, who have spent 30 years as renters, working multiple jobs to support their family. They generously allowed Mr. Lawson to use the space temporarily after his wife's passing, but that permissive use was always intended to be transitional. Temporary, transitional, permissive use. The legal language strips away 6 years of my life, reduces my home to a temporary accommodation that was always intended to be revoked when more deserving occupants became available. The defendants argue that Mr. Lawson has invested in improvements to the property, Keene continues, but these improvements were made with the full knowledge that his occupancy was temporary and subject to revocation. Making unauthorized modifications to property you don't own cannot create tenancy rights where none existed originally. Unauthorized modifications. My electrical work, done with permits and professional oversight. My roof repairs, completed after the insurance company required them following storm damage. My heating system upgrades, installed after Dan and Vanessa complained about high energy bills. Every improvement now reframed as evidence of my presumption, my overreach, my failure to understand my place in the family hierarchy. When it's our turn, Carla presents our case with the methodical precision of someone who understands that facts are more powerful than emotions. She displays bank transfer records showing consistent monthly payments for utilities, property taxes, and maintenance. She shows before and after photos of improvements, along with permits and inspection reports. She presents email and text message evidence of Dan and Vanessa's ongoing acceptance and encouragement of my financial contributions. Your Honor, Carla says, the evidence clearly shows an established pattern of tenancy. Mr. Lawson has been paying for utilities, contributing to property taxes, making permitted improvements with the knowledge and approval of the property owners, and maintaining exclusive use of the suite for over 6 years. This is not a temporary guest situation. This is a documented landlord-tenant relationship, regardless of the family connection. She's right, and I can see that Judge Patel is following the argument, taking notes, asking pointed questions about the timeline of payments and improvements. But I can also see Travis Keene preparing his rebuttal, ready to bring the conversation back to Rosa and Miguel's deserving situation, to the moral imperative of homeownership for hard-working immigrants, to the reasonable family decision to transition housing resources to where they're most needed. And then Lily stands up. Your Honor, she says in her clear 7-year-old voice, can I show you something Grandpa doesn't know? The courtroom goes absolutely silent. Judge Patel looks surprised, but not annoyed. She has children of her own, I can tell, because she has that particular kind of patience that comes from understanding how kids think. What would you like to show me, sweetheart? The judge asks. Lily pulls her tablet out of her backpack and walks toward the judge's bench with the confidence of someone who hasn't yet learned to be afraid of authority figures. I have a video from our house camera, she says. Mommy and Abuela and Abuelo were in Grandpa's house when he wasn't there. I feel my heart stop. Dan's face goes white. Vanessa starts to stand up, but Travis Keene puts a hand on her arm to keep her seated. When was this, honey? Judge Patel asks, accepting the tablet and examining the screen. Last week, Lily says. When Grandpa went to the store, I was watching from my bedroom window because I wanted to see if he would bring me candy, but then Mommy went into his house with Abuela and Abuelo. Judge Patel adjusts her reading glasses and plays the video. The courtroom is so quiet I can hear the air conditioning humming, can hear Vanessa's sharp intake of breath, can hear the soft electronic sounds from the tablet speakers. I can't see the screen from where I'm sitting, but I watch the judge's face change as she views whatever Lily's home security camera captured. Her eyebrows rise slightly, then draw together in concentration, then settle into the kind of expression that suggests someone has made a very serious mistake. "Ms. Lawson," Judge Patel says, looking directly at Vanessa, "would you like to explain what I'm seeing in this video?" We were just," Vanessa starts, but she can't seem to find words for whatever the camera recorded. Judge Patel plays the video again, this time angling the tablet so the courtroom can see the screen. I watch my daughter-in-law enter my home with Rosa and Miguel, watch them rifle through mail on my kitchen counter, watch Vanessa point to various fixtures and surfaces while Miguel takes photos with his phone. And then I watch Vanessa reach up and pull the battery from my carbon monoxide detector. The rage that fills me is so pure, so absolute, that for a moment I lose the ability to process what I'm seeing. She disabled my safety equipment. She sabotaged the alarm system that keeps me alive in my sleep, that guards against the invisible killer that could end my life without warning. But the video isn't finished. I watch Vanessa lean close to Rosa and Miguel, her voice barely audible, but captured clearly by Lily's tablet. "If it fails the next inspection, he'll have to move out anyway. Housing code violations, you know? We just won't tell Grandpa. It's a surprise." The courtroom erupts. Travis Keene is on his feet, objecting to the admission of evidence that wasn't properly disclosed in discovery. Carla is frantically taking notes. Dan looks like he might be sick. Rosa and Miguel are staring at Vanessa like they've never seen her before, and Judge Patel is furious. "Miss Lawson," she says, her voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from years of dealing with people who think they can manipulate the legal system. "Did you intentionally disable safety equipment in Mr. Lawson's residence?" "It was just, we were trying to," Vanessa starts, but she can't finish the sentence because there's no good way to explain tampering with carbon monoxide detection systems. "You were trying to create a housing code violation that would force your father-in-law to vacate his residence," Judge Patel states. "You were attempting to manipulate a safety inspection to support your eviction case. We thought it would be easier if..." Vanessa tries again, but Judge Patel cuts her off. "Easier than what? Easier than following the law? Easier than respecting tenant rights? Easier than not endangering an elderly man's life?" The judge takes a moment to review her notes, and the silence stretches until it becomes unbearable. When she speaks again, her voice is controlled but carrying an edge that suggests she's seen enough family manipulation to last several lifetimes. "I want to be very clear about what I've observed here today," Judge Patel says. "The plaintiffs have presented this case as a reasonable family decision to transition housing resources to deserving first-time homeowners. They've argued that Mr. Lawson's occupancy was always temporary and subject to revocation at will." She pauses, looking directly at Vanessa. "However, the evidence shows something very different. The evidence shows a 6-year pattern of documented tenancy, with consistent utility payments, permitted improvements, and ongoing financial contributions to property maintenance and taxes. The evidence shows that Mr. Lawson has been functioning as a tenant, with the full knowledge and acceptance of the property owners." Another pause. More disturbing, the video evidence shows a deliberate attempt to create false housing code violations by tampering with safety equipment. This is not only illegal interference with tenant rights, it's endangerment of human life. She looks at Travis Keene. "Mr. Keene, your client's moral arguments about first-time homeownership might be compelling in other circumstances, but they don't override established tenant rights, and they certainly don't justify endangering someone's safety to manufacture grounds for eviction." Judge Patel's ruling is swift and comprehensive. Case dismissed with prejudice. Injunction granted. Dan and Vanessa are legally barred from entering my residence without my express written consent. Referral to the Housing Authority for investigation into interference with safety devices. Recommendation that I change my locks immediately and document any further harassment. "Mr. Lawson," she says, looking directly at me, "you have established tenancy rights based on the documented evidence. Your occupancy is not subject to arbitrary revocation based on family preferences or alternative housing plans. And then, more quietly, I'm sorry your family put you through this. No one should have to defend their right to live safely in their own home. The aftermath is a blur of paperwork and hushed conversations in the courthouse hallway. Rosa and Miguel approach me before leaving, Miguel looking ashamed and Rosa dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. We didn't know, Rosa says in heavily accented English. We didn't know about the detector thing. We're sorry, Hank. We're very sorry. I believe her. They're good people caught up in their daughter's strategic planning, innocent parties who wanted a home and didn't ask too many questions about how that home became available. I know you didn't, I tell them. You're not the problem here. Dan won't look at me. He stands with Vanessa near the courtroom doors, their heads bent together in urgent conversation. Lily has been taken to the bathroom by one of Vanessa's sisters, spared the worst of the adult recriminations and legal consequences. As I leave the courthouse with Carla, she gives me the business card for a locksmith and reminds me to document everything going forward, every interaction, every attempt at contact, every violation of the court order. Change those locks today, she says, and get a licensed electrician to inspect all your safety equipment. We need documentation that everything has been properly restored. I drive home through the familiar streets of my neighborhood, past the school where I worked for 43 years, past the hardware store where I know every aisle by heart, past all the landmarks of a life I thought I was going to lose. I pull into the driveway and sit in my truck for a moment, looking up at the windows of my home. My home. Not their guest suite, not temporary housing, not a space I'm borrowing until more deserving occupants need it. My home, with legal documentation and court orders and all the protection that paper and law can provide. I call Javi, the locksmith whose card Carla gave me. He's a man in his 30s who runs a family business and understands the importance of security, of knowing who has access to your safe spaces. You want to rekey the existing locks or install new ones? He asks, examining my doors with professional assessment. New ones, I say. Everything new. Deadbolts, door knobs, window locks. I want to start fresh. While Javi works, I call Martinez Electric and schedule an inspection of all my safety equipment. Carlos Martinez has been doing electrical work in this town for 20 years, and he understands that code compliance isn't just about passing inspections, it's about staying alive. Someone tampered with your CO detector? He asks, his voice carrying the outrage of a professional who takes safety seriously. That's not just illegal, man. That's attempted murder. That evening, after the locks are changed and the safety inspection is complete, I sit at my kitchen table and write a letter. 1 page, single-spaced, with the careful penmanship I learned in grade school and have maintained through decades of writing work orders and incident reports. The letter is simple and direct. Dan and Vanessa. The court has ruled. I will continue to live in my residence above the garage. You are legally prohibited from entering my home without written consent. I have changed all locks. You no longer have keys. Do not ask for keys. Do not enter without permission. Do not send family members to pressure me into providing access. If you wish to maintain a relationship with me, it will be on terms that respect my autonomy and legal rights. I suggest family therapy to work through the issues that led to this situation. I'm willing to participate if you're serious about repair. If you're not interested in therapy, that's your choice. But understand that our relationship cannot return to what it was. Trust, once broken, requires intentional work to rebuild. I love my son and my granddaughter. That love doesn't require me to accept treatment that endangers my safety or violates my rights. Hank. I fold the letter into a business envelope, address it in my careful handwriting, and walk across the driveway to their mailbox. The thunk of the letter hitting the metal bottom sounds like a door closing, like a boundary being set, like the first note of a song I'm finally learning to sing. The response comes in stages, like the symptoms of an illness working through a body. First, there are the phone calls. Dan calls repeatedly, leaving voicemails that cycle through denial, anger, bargaining, and depression with the predictable progression of someone working through loss. He wants to talk this through, to find a solution that works for everyone, to get past this misunderstanding. But there's no misunderstanding. There's a daughter-in-law who tried to evict me through legal manipulation and safety sabotage, and a son who chose her side over my right to live safely in my home. There's a granddaughter who inadvertently saved my life by showing a judge the truth that the adults were trying to hide. I don't return the calls. Vanessa tries a different approach. She posts on social media about the challenges of caring for aging family members, about the difficult decisions that come with balancing everyone's needs, about the importance of family unity during stressful times. The post gets dozens of sympathetic comments from relatives and neighbors who don't know the full story, who see only the carefully curated narrative of a devoted daughter-in-law struggling with a stubborn elderly man. I block her on all social media platforms. The relatives start calling next. The same aunts and uncles and cousins who pressured me to be reasonable before the court hearing now want to know why I'm breaking up the family over something that could be worked out if I would just be the bigger person. I refer them to my attorney. You could at least let them come get their things from the garage, Cousin Rick says during one particularly frustrating conversation. They have Christmas decorations in there, kids' bicycles, family stuff. They can schedule an appointment through my attorney, I tell him. Everything will be inventoried and supervised. You're really going to make this that difficult? I'm really going to follow the court order and protect my safety, I say. If that's difficult for them, they should have thought about that before tampering with my carbon monoxide detector. Rick goes quiet. Like most of the family, he's heard about the courtroom drama secondhand, and the details get softer in the retelling. Vanessa made a mistake, or had poor judgment, but certainly didn't engage in deliberate endangerment. The family narrative requires my reaction to be disproportionate to the offense, rather than acknowledging the offense itself. It can't have been that serious, Rick says finally. She wouldn't really have hurt you. Carbon monoxide poisoning kills people, I tell him. It's called the silent killer because you don't wake up when it happens. You just stop breathing in your sleep. Another silence. I'm sure she didn't think. No, I interrupt. She didn't think about whether I would die. She thought about whether I would move out. The fact that those two things might be connected didn't factor into her planning. I hang up, and Rick doesn't call back. The weeks pass with the strange quietness that comes after crisis resolution. No emergency phone calls about broken water heaters or failing electrical systems. No requests to babysit while Dan and Vanessa deal with work emergencies. No Sunday dinners where I pretend to enjoy conversations about vacation plans and school fundraisers while Vanessa calculates the most efficient way to redistribute my living space. I realize how much of my time and energy was spent being available for other people's emergencies, how much of my identity was built around being the person who could fix things, who could be counted on to drop everything and solve problems and provide resources whenever family members needed them. Now I test my smoke detectors on schedule. I maintain my own space according to my own standards. I grocery shop for one person. I watch the news and read books and call old friends from work without interruption. I build the bird feeder I've been planning for 3 years but never had time to construct. The bird feeder is a complicated project involving precise measurements and careful joints, the kind of craftsmanship that requires patience and attention to detail. I work on it in the evenings, cutting and sanding and fitting pieces together with the same care I once brought to electrical panel installations and emergency repairs. When it's finished, I mount it outside my kitchen window where I can watch the birds while I drink my morning coffee. Cardinals and blue jays and little brown sparrows that I learned to identify from a field guide I buy at the bookstore downtown. Lily comes to visit on a Saturday afternoon in November, walking across the driveway with Dan while Vanessa stays in their house. It's the first time I've seen my granddaughter since the court hearing, and she looks somehow older, more careful, like she's learned something about adult behavior that she wishes she didn't know. "Hi, Grandpa," she says, hugging me with the fierce intensity of a 7-year-old who has missed someone important. "I like your new locks. They're shiny. Thank you, I say. They're very strong locks. They keep me safe. We spend the afternoon building a smaller bird feeder together, one she can take home and hang in her own yard. I teach her about measuring twice and cutting once, about how patience makes things turn out better, about the satisfaction that comes from creating something useful with your own hands. Are you mad at me about the video? She asks while we're sanding rough edges smooth. No, sweetheart, I tell her. You told the truth. The truth is never something to be ashamed of. Mommy says I shouldn't have shown it to the judge without asking permission. I stop sanding and look at her, this small person who saved my life by being honest about what she saw, who trusted that the truth was more important than family secrets. The truth doesn't need permission, I say. When someone is doing something wrong, it's okay to tell. It's actually brave to tell. She thinks about this while we work, her small hands carefully smoothing the wood with focused concentration. Are we still family? She asks eventually. We're always family, I tell her. But sometimes family members need to live in different places and have different rules.